Hello once again, everybody. Turbo 200 4R rebuild sequence. More of the story. Finally got some better light around here. Hope that'll help with the cause. Anyway, just a few things. Some of you folks have asked me, why do you have to soak clutch plates in transmission fluid before you put them in? Well, the answer to that is, well, as you know, anything dry is not a very good conductor of heat. Anything wet conducts heat quite well. So, you know, when you get your clothes soaking wet, how cold you feel to chill, because you have a much more conductive transfer of air, or actually I might just say heat, from your body into the surrounding air, so you cool off much better. It's the same thing with the transmission. It needs some sort of a liquid to carry away heat. So if, let's say, you put these plates into the transmission and they're dry, and you start it up right away, these plates are spinning around depending on which element they're attached to in the transmission. They'll be spinning around and they'll be knocking against the steel plates over here, and they'll be making up quite a bit of heat. That can start to heat them up, glaze them, and start making them chunk, and then they'll be no good. So what the fluid does is it helps to carry away heat from the plates that might end up in them when they're spinning against each other. Because remember, in certain instances the steel plates are stationary, the friction plates are spinning around, so when they're knocking against each other, they're going to be making a lot of heat. And also there's friction modifiers, so when the transmission shifts into a particular gear, it helps the plates to grab and to lock into each other just that much faster. An old trick for people to do was to use the old Ford transmission fluid type F in the GM and the Chrysler transmissions, because it had a quicker lockup characteristic, so it would give you a slightly harder shift in a GM and a Chrysler transmission. Conversely, if you try to use the GM Dextran fluids in the Ford transmissions, they would really shift soft, and that could end up giving you trouble. Now, the reason why Ford used this type F fluid was so that because they used a different composition friction plates and bands in their transmission, they had more of a, I'd say, more of a metallic or ceramic content in them. Although I could stand to be corrected, but they were definitely a harder material that I've seen versus the GM and the Chrysler transmissions I've taken apart and rebuilt in the period. So what we're going to do today is we're going to put the Ford clutches back together in this transmission in 204R, and I'll quickly show you how it's done. That should be a good enough view for now. Okay. We always start with a steel plate to back up against something. So in this case, these are all new steel plates. And you follow by a friction. Another steel. You would tend to think another friction, but hang on a second. This transmission uses a slightly different way of lining up these plates. Again, always check the books, but you should always double and triple check everywhere, because as we saw in an earlier movie, we found a mistake in the assembly sequence from the factory of the low reverse clutch, which is located slightly more towards the back of the transmission over here. Taking a look at the book, we can see that we have the backing plate that we put in, one of the frictions that we put in, but now look, there's two steel flat plates that go together. So if you put it together any different way than that, you'll end up having a problem. It won't last too long. It'll shift for a while, but it'll give you a bit of a problem really further down the road, not too much further down the road. So we have to back up our first steel plate with a second steel plate. Now we can put another friction on. The second friction. There's two frictions in the fourth clutch assembly. Get it to line up. And we finally back it up with a thicker plate, called the backing plate for the fourth clutch. This is the backing plate. This is what this whole assembly reacts against. Now to hold this in together, we have to put a snap ring in. Which of course is buried. But not for too long. Success. You should always try to index the rings so that you have a chance of getting them out. The next time you have to do this, which hopefully won't be for a long time, always make sure they're well seated. Doesn't matter which clutch assembly you're doing, but just make sure that they're all properly seated within their grooves. Otherwise they can pop out at the most inopportune time. That usually means it destroys something in the way, and then you've got to take the thing apart. Going on top of this, it's just a small retainer. It's like an oil deflector that goes on top of that. And then finishing this off, we're not quite ready for it yet, because we have to put a couple of valves and springs back into the pressure regulator assembly before we can put the pump back on, but then the pump slides on top of here pretty much like that. You can see the plates went on okay because our pump is seated right along the bottom. It's not quite indexed for the bolt holes. There we go. Now it's indexed for the bolt holes, but it's seated nice and properly. We have the proper amount of play on the end of the shaft over here. Everything turns okay, which means that no clutches or anything are jammed. And this thing will be basically ready to go. So we're marching on and on with this transmission. Hope you're having fun with this. I certainly am. I'll have even more fun once it all works out on the car. Thanks. Till next time.